The Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. The Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 552, an act permitting classification of individuals based on biological sex under certain limited circumstances. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 3 to 2. Senator Abbas for the committee.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 552 ought to pass. Senate Bill 552 provides a definition of biological sex and clarifies that in certain limited circumstances, classification based on biological sex does not constitute unlawful discrimination. As outlined in the bill's analysis, the legislation applies narrowly to multi-user laboratory and locker room facilities, certain athletic competitions, and correctional or similar involuntary commitment settings. As a legislature, we have found a fundamental obligation to protect the privacy and safety of women and girls. This bill recognizes that while New Hampshire remains firmly committed to equal dignity and respect for all people, there are circumstances where biological distinctions are directly tied to legitimate privacy and safety concerns. For these reasons, I respectfully ask that you join the Senate Judiciary Committee in voting SB 552 ought to pass. Thank you, Madam President. If I may speak further.
Yes, you may speak.
And thank you, Madam President. And speaking of protecting women's rights, I ask my colleagues to please support the committee's recommendation of ought to pass. Women, and I'm talking about all women, deserve private spaces that are designated for women, and they deserve fair opportunity and fair competition when it comes to playing sports. Let's be clear what this bill does. What it does is that no public or private entity that is required, that if they are not required to separate their bathrooms based on biological sex, but if they do separate their bathrooms based on biological sex, that decision that the public or private entity makes does not amount to discrimination. We're leaving it to the choice of that particular entity. Women in a locker room should not, if they're using a locker room, they should not be forced to use that space that has traditionally been reserved for women, where they normally get changed, to have to change in front of a biological male. A trans woman is not a biological woman. They're not. Now, I understand and I respect that some people believe or they may identify as a gender that's different than what their biological sex is. Just because someone identifies as a woman does not make them a woman. Just because someone identifies as a man does not make that person a man. It's not what their biological sex is. And when it comes to women's equality, the late Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she did a tremendous job before she sat on the Supreme Court as a lawyer. One of the arguments she made to the court, where she was successful in, that shaped a lot of our laws today, was arguing that biological sex is an immutable characteristic. It's immutable. And that was a key thing the court relied upon. Now, in respect to the sports, again, women, there was a time when women did not have a fair opportunity in sports. Title IX was intended to address that. Now, if you're going to allow biological males to play girls' sports, what that does is that creates less opportunity for women to play in women's sports. That's just a fact. But it also impacts the level of competition. And what I really worry about, listen, the star athlete is going to make the team. But think of a basketball team. The girl who gets the last spot on that team, they work very hard just to be a reserve that starts the game on the bench, just praying to get in the game. Well, if you let a biological male on that team, that girl's getting left off the team. That's just a fact, because that's one less, every spot that goes to a biological male, one biological woman loses that spot on the girls' team. That's a fact. Now, in respect to how this bill was drafted, there was testimony that if a person transitions a certain amount of time, there is no unfair competition in the sports. If a biological male transitions for 12 months or 18 months, we heard conflicting reports, but ultimately there is no conclusive finding in the medical community as how long in the transition process a person has to be in order for there to be no unfair competition. There's none. So this, to me, is narrowly tailored to address a very specific issue. It's maintaining and preserving fair opportunity for both women when it comes to playing sports and the competition itself. So please join me in support the committee's recommendation ought to pass. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Senator Avard has a question of?
22, please. Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not clear. Is there a law right now that prevents me, dressed like a man, to walk into a ladies' room?
I don't believe so.
Follow up? So regardless of whether I dress like a man or a woman, there's nothing that would prevent me from going into the ladies' room. There is no law that says you can't do that.
So technically, there's none. What has generally happened is that each institution or each entity, whether private or public, was creating their own policies. And now what this will do is make sure if one wants to allow you to go in the women's bathroom, that they can't be sued for discrimination, or if they don't want to let you go in the women's bathroom, they also will not be sued for discrimination.
More follow-up comment.
Follow-up?
So basically, if I go in and this bill is enacted, then an institution can say to me, please remove, and I have no means of lawsuit. But if I go in now without this bill, any man around the state can go into any women's bathroom, even if you're dressed like a man, dressed like a woman, or you can't tell. And there's no repercussions if we decide to go in there regardless.
The repercussions not for you. The repercussions are what they face is the discrimination claims against the entities, depending on which way they want to enforce it.
Thank you.
Okay. The bill is still on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Senator Sullivan has a question of?
Thank you, Madam President. My colleague from District 22. Thank you for taking my question.
Anytime.
Would you believe that prior to this legislature changing the laws some years ago, I think it was 2018 maybe, prior to that time, that women often did share a bathroom with transgender people, but we still had the ability, if someone was in the bathroom that was a biological male, that we felt like they were there to do us harm, we had the ability to go ask them to be removed, and that, when we changed that legislation, that ability was removed from us?
It was, and I don't believe that that was the intent of that legislation. And what would happen is if that was happening and that entity removed that person from the bathroom or the locker room, they're going to get the ones that are accused of discrimination, and they're going to face a lawsuit just because you felt that you were in danger.
Would you follow up?
Follow up?
Sure.
Would you agree that a biological male now has more rights to a ladies' bathroom than biological women do?
Well, I'm not sure if I went into the women's bathroom and they kicked me out, I'm not sure I would have a discrimination claim, but I do run into this problem with my daughter. She's 4 years old, and I assure you this, I'm not taking her in the men's locker room, period. I don't care what anyone says. And this came up during the hearing, and I asked an attorney testifying in opposition to the bill what he recommends, and he thought I should consult with the manager of the gym. When a 4-year-old has to go, you don't get time for that. So I suppose I'm not going to let her go in by herself. She's too young for that. I guess I can go in the women's room. Is it discrimination against me or my daughter? I'm not sure. But I'll tell you what's happening, I think particularly for women, they're not going to appreciate that I'm in there, even though I'm just trying to be a good dad. because I know by me going in there would make them uncomfortable.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, the bill is still on second reading. Is there any further discussion? The chair recognizes Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to speak in opposition to the pending motion for this bill. Needless to say, we've been down this road probably way too many times in most people's opinions. But there are some that are fixated on this issue, have been for years, and it's been to no avail and to little success, whether it's the court, the governor, or the thousands of constituents who've signed in opposition to these bills. Policies like this have been soundly rejected. This bill is draconian. It's an affront to liberty, and it's not a great use of our limited time here. We continually target the freedoms of a minority instead of using our limited time on other issues really critical to Granite Staters. This bill neither serves to improve safety nor to improve the material living standard of any Granite Stater. Instead, it endorses discrimination. It encourages profiling to the discomfort of the very few people who are gender nonconforming in our state. We still have residents that are very, very concerned, and they're men and women who fail to meet one's individual visual standard of what a man or woman should look like, and they're afraid that they're going to be profiled. Look no further than the incident at the Liberty Hotel in Boston. Look no further than the 3 vetoes of this bill from our Republican governors. Look no further than the hundreds of people who have testified against this bill, signed in against this bill, in comparison to the few dozen that supported it. We have no mandate for this. We have no reason for this. Let's dispose of this bill so we can get back to work on meaningful policy. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. Again, the bill is on second reading, and is there any further discussion? Senator Altshuler wishes to speak.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in opposition of the ought to pass. The Judiciary Committee was asked to consider a simple question posed to us in the hearing for this bill by a member of the House of Representatives serving on the other side of the wall at this moment. In her powerful testimony, she asked us point blank, what restroom should I go to? What a question to have to consider. Under Senate Bill 552, if a business posted a sign, biological sex only, she would face the very real possibility of being challenged, removed, or humiliated simply for trying to use the bathroom. And this isn't hypothetical. It's happening already. It happened at the Liberty Hotel in Boston last May. Ainsley Baker and her girlfriend, Liz Victor, both cisgender women, were having a really fun afternoon at the hotel's Kentucky Derby party until they went to the ladies' room. Ainsley was in a stall with her pants down, and Liz was washing her hands when a security guard came roaring in and began yelling and banging on the stall door. After screaming at Ainsley and accusing her of being a man, the security guard made a scene, escorting her out of the building, while patrons in the lobby yelled at Ainsley with, "Get him out of here, he's a creep." The hotel has already paid $10,000 to settle that claim because somebody thought Ainsley, a cisgender woman with short hair who appears gender nonconforming, looked a little bit too masculine. And that's what this bill will invite into every locker room, every school, every public space in New Hampshire. We have a good law against discrimination, and it was passed in 1992. We added gender protections in 2018 with bipartisan support signed by a Republican governor. The law exists because this legislature recognized a fundamental truth, that the dignity and safety of every resident in this state is a matter of public concern, not a courtesy, not a preference, a matter of law. RSA 354-A:1 says plainly that discrimination on the basis of gender identity, threatens the rights and proper privileges of our inhabitants, and menaces the institutions and foundation of a free democratic state. Those are not idle words. They are findings of fact by this legislature, and Senate Bill 552 asks you to crudely carve out an exception right through the heart of them. The sponsor of this bill testified that it's middle ground. He said it doesn't mandate anything. He said in the hearing, it simply allows businesses and organizations to classify people by biological sex without legal consequence. So in other words, it's just a little bit of discrimination, just a little bit. But here's what that means in practice. It means a gym, a school, a cafe can post a sign that says you do not belong here, and the state of New Hampshire will hold you harmless for it. It means a trans woman who has lived as a woman for years, who carries a driver's license that says female, who presents in every way as a woman, a former colleague, if you will, of ours, can be removed from a woman's restroom by a security guard, dragged out in front of a crowd, left sobbing on the sidewalk, and the business faces no liability whatsoever. So let me talk about the governors, because this legislature has been here before, several times in fact, and each time the person responsible for signing that bill into law looked at this language and said no. Governor Sununu vetoed a nearly identical bill in 2024, and he did not mince words. He wrote that the bill runs contrary to New Hampshire's live free or die spirit and seeks to solve problems that have not presented themselves. A Republican governor using our state's defining phrase to reject this approach. Then Governor Ayotte vetoed House Bill 148 in 2025. She acknowledged, and I want to be fair to her, that she sees legitimate privacy concerns in some of the underlying issues, but she vetoed it anyway, writing that the bill was overly broad, impractical to enforce, potentially creating exclusionary environments for some of our citizens. And then, just days before the hearing for this, Senate Bill 552, she vetoed Senate Bill 268, and her statement was very direct. I made it clear that this issue needed to be addressed in a thoughtful, narrow way that protects the privacy, safety, and rights of all Granite Staters. Unfortunately, there is minimal difference between Senate Bill 268 and the one I vetoed last year. Minimal difference, the governor's own words. And yet here we are again with Senate Bill 552, which a member of the Judiciary Committee noted, side by side, is functionally identical to the bills that came before it. This legislature has now tried to override those vetoes twice, and failed, because even within this body, there are not enough votes to change the law for just a little bit of discrimination. So the question before this body isn't really whether this bill reflects sound policy. Two governors of the same party as its sponsors have already answered that question. The question is whether we will keep sending the same rejected bill back through the process, putting transgender Granite Staters through hearing after hearing, year after year, in hopes that something will change. The argument for this bill rests in fear. Fear that biological males are, in the exact testimony of the sponsor, putting on a little makeup and pink shorts and entering women's spaces causing harm. Direct quote. I will not dismiss the genuine distress of women who testified to having had frightening experiences with men. Those experiences are real and they matter. But fear, however sincere, is not the same as evidence. And as Governor Sununu wrote, this bill seeks to solve problems that have not presented themselves. And we just voted down a bill directly based on that because it hasn't presented itself. So what the evidence actually shows is that transgender people are the ones being assaulted. They are more than 4 times as likely to be the victims of violent crime than the general population. When forced into facilities that don't match their lived identity, victimization rates are not low. They're catastrophic. In prison settings, transgender women housed with men face sexual assault at rates approaching 50%. The GLAD attorney who testified before us identified specific provisions in New Hampshire law, RSA 354A18, 354A15, 354A27, that already exempt religious organizations from civil rights liability. The concern raised about churches and synagogues that was in committee, it's already addressed in law. It's already in law. This bill wants to solve a problem that the law has already addressed. And what about enforcement? The sponsor, pressed on this point, says, I don't know, maybe you can do body checks. That was a quote. I don't know that you could do body checks. I have the YouTube transcript, so I'm happy to provide the timestamp. That's an honest answer. It's an honest answer, but there's no workable enforcement mechanism. What the bill actually produces is not safety, it's vigilantism. Strangers policing other strangers in bathrooms. Security guards making snap judgments about who looks female enough. Cisgender women, tall women, short women, broad-shouldered women, caught in the crossfire. One person who testified before the committee said it very plainly. She is the person who gets removed from bathrooms. Not because she's transgender, she told us she's not, but because she wears a hat and she keeps her hair short. She put it on in committee. It happened to her in every state she's lived in. She has been misgendered and accused of being in spaces she shouldn't be in during jury duty. It happened when she went to get a COVID vaccine here. This bill would give every business in New Hampshire legal cover to do exactly that to her every time and to every woman like her. New Hampshire's law against discrimination is not a mistake to be corrected. It's the foundational recognition that all of our residents, regardless of age, sex, race, creed, disability, or gender identity, deserve to move through public life with dignity. I urge this body to overturn this ought to pass. Honor the law we have. Honor the people it was written to protect. And let's stop making them come back here year after year to defend their right to just exist. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. We are still on, okay, Senator Altshuler requested roll call, seconded by Senator Lang. We're still on second reading. I have Senator Birdsall would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam President. We face the same question we've answered many times. Do women and girls have a right to their own spaces? Locker rooms, high school sports gyms or teams, even prisons. Biological males do not have a right to these private female spaces. As I had said before when in session, when I was young, a number of years ago, I went from a Catholic school to a public school. My first experience with gym and changing in front of women, girls, which I did not do. But let me tell you, as a 13, 14-year-old, if there had been a biological man in that room, I would have been upset, as would my parents have. And as far as fear goes, so women are now considered second-class citizens because if they fear that they're in jeopardy, then their fear and that should not be addressed. That is absolutely a ridiculous thought. Senate Bill 552 simply clarifies that biological men cannot file a complaint with the State Commission of Human Rights if they are denied access to space that should be reserved for women. Women deserve their own places without being interrupted by biological men. Please join me in supporting ought to pass on Senate Bill 552. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, the bill is still on second reading. Is there any discussion? The question is on the adoption of the committee amendment of ought to pass on Senate Bill 552. I recognize Senator Lang for a PI.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I begin, I know it's the general practice of the building anyway, that when doing a PI, the people who are opposing the committee recommendation generally goes first. I'm going to be supporting the committee recommendation, so if the other side would like to have a PI, I'd be willing to yield for them to do it.
We didn't have anybody listed who were against. So Senator Altschiller, if you'd like to give a PI.
Thank you, Madam President. If I know that Granite Staters consistently and overwhelmingly oppose this legislation that rolls back civil rights for our transgender children, family members, friends, and colleagues, and if I know that this bill will encourage even more violence against women, particularly those who do not conform or present in a way that conforms to gender stereotypes, and finally, if I know that people who think they can clock a transgender sister can't even tell when it's time to let go of this hateful crusade, would I now vote no on the ought to pass motion?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lang, you're recognized for your PI.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, if I know that the complete phrase when you say trans women or trans man is transgender woman or transgender man, not transsex woman or transsex man. And Madam President, if I further know that in medical journals, medical studies, and medical practice, it is a specific, distinct call-out not to confuse gender and sex when doing studies. And Madam President, if I know and I believe that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was correct when she said in Frontiero versus Richardson, a sex discrimination case, by the way, before the U.S. Supreme Court that, quote, sex, like race, is a visible, immutable fact and characteristic. Would I now vote ought to pass on Senate Bill 556?
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 552. A roll call has been requested by Senator Altschiller, seconded by Senator Lang. Are you ready for the question? Okay.
Yes.
The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Rochefort.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator McConkey.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Prentice.
No.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innes. Yes. Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
No.
Senator McHugh.
Yes.
Senator Avard.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Reardon.
No.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Sullivan.
Yes.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator Long. No. Senator Perkins Quokka.
No.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon. Senator Altschiller.
No.
And Senator Carson.
Yes. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. Okay.